"Sir, you're gonna have to leave now. You know, it's funny. A new waitress once stopped a CEO from signing a deal worth $100 million. Think about that for a second. What if the person who saved your life was someone you'd never laid eyes on before? And not only that, but someone who had every single reason to just stay quiet, to look the other way." In the thick of things at Le Bernardin, Manhattan's most exclusive dining experience, James Chun, a man of 42, gave his silk tie one last, meticulous adjustment. Tonight was the night. This meeting, it was going to be a game changer. The merger documents, each page representing millions of dollars, sat neatly organized in his leather briefcase, practically radiating potential. 15 years. He'd poured 15 years of blood, sweat, and tears into reaching this very moment. He'd painstakingly built his tech company from the humble beginnings of a cramped garage into the powerhouse it was today, a global empire. Any minute now, the rival CEO was scheduled to arrive, ready to put pen to paper and finalize the $100 million acquisition that would cement both their legacies for generations to come. James had meticulously rehearsed every detail of the meeting, playing out every conceivable question and answer in his mind. There was just no way he could have predicted the arrival of a young woman, wearing the standard-issue server's apron, who approached his table. Her hands were trembling ever so slightly as she leaned in, whispering the words that would completely derail his meticulously planned evening. Her name tag simply read Lucy, but her eyes held a secret, a piece of knowledge that was about to save his skin. "Where are you watching from tonight?" Lucy Martinez had been a waitress at Le Bernardin for all of 3 weeks, and honestly, she still felt like she was faking it, a complete fraud amongst the seasoned, almost surgically precise waitstaff. At 34, she was older than the majority of the new hires, which added to her anxiety. But after her husband, David, was involved in a terrible accident that left them with a mountain of medical bills threatening to drown them both, she desperately needed this job. The elegant dining room, with its soft, flattering lighting and the hushed, almost reverential conversations of Manhattan's elite, intimidated her to no end. She was, however, fully determined to prove that she was worthy of serving in this establishment, that she belonged. But tonight had a different feel. The maitre d' had assigned her to Section 7, the area of the restaurant where the most important, most influential guests were seated. "Just follow the usual protocols," he had instructed her, while meticulously straightening his bow tie. "Absolutely no mistakes tonight, Lucy." She nodded, her stomach in knots, and quickly checked her reflection in the polished silver service station. Her hands still trembled just a touch when she carried the heavy trays laden with dishes, but she was getting stronger with each shift. She saw James Chun enter the restaurant with the undeniable confidence of a man who was completely at ease, who belonged anywhere and everywhere he went. His charcoal suit was tailored to perfection, hugging his physique in all the right places, and he moved with a purposeful stride, like a man who had never, not even for a second, doubted his place in the world. Lucy recognized him instantly. She had seen his picture splashed across the pages of business magazines while she spent countless hours waiting in the sterile environment of her husband's hospital room. The tech mogul who had seemingly revolutionized cloud computing before even turning 40. Tonight, he carried himself like a man standing on the very precipice of an enormous victory. As Lucy meticulously arranged the bread service at his table, she caught snippets of his phone conversation. "The contracts are airtight," she overheard him saying, his voice carrying that quiet, unmistakable authority that only comes from a lifetime of being listened to. "By midnight, we'll have officially sealed the biggest deal in both our company's histories." He flashed a confident smile as he ended the call, completely oblivious to the fact that Lucy had frozen in place right beside his table. The name he had mentioned, Harrison Tech Industries, sent a shiver of ice down her spine. 6 months ago, that very same company had heartlessly laid off her husband, David, completely blindsiding him, right before his devastating diagnosis. And to add insult to injury, they cut off his health insurance when they needed it the most. The executives had plastered on fake smiles for the news interviews, spewing corporate jargon about restructuring for efficiency, all while families like hers watched their carefully constructed futures crumble into dust. Lucy's grip tightened on the bread basket as painful memories came flooding back, threatening to overwhelm her. David's confused, heartbroken face as security unceremoniously escorted him out of the building. The ever-growing stack of medical bills that followed him home, like some unwanted pet. The memory of her holding him late one night as he sobbed, apologizing for getting sick, for becoming a burden. But tonight wasn't about her pain, about her struggles. Tonight, she had inadvertently overheard something that had the potential to completely destroy James Chen's perfect evening, to send his world crashing down around him. And despite everything that had happened, despite the immense personal cost, she knew she couldn't, in good conscience, just let it happen. The rival CEO he was scheduled to meet with had a well-deserved reputation for last-minute betrayals, for pulling the rug out from under people at the very last second. And Lucy had just stumbled upon information that could save James from making the biggest, most catastrophic mistake of his entire life. Lucy spent the next hour discreetly observing James Chun as he prepared for his meeting, her heart pounding in her chest with each passing minute. She refilled his water glass not once, but twice, her hands surprisingly steadier than they had been in weeks, all while her mind wrestled with an impossible decision. 3 tables over, she had spotted Robert Harrison's assistant making hushed, furtive phone calls near the restroom, calls that kept mentioning backup buyers and switching things up at the last minute. The restaurant hummed with its usual sophisticated energy, crystal glasses chiming softly as servers moved gracefully between tables, like dancers performing some ancient, intricate ritual. Lucy found a small measure of comfort in the familiar routine, mechanically folding napkins, meticulously polishing silverware, carefully arranging flowers in their vases. But no matter how hard she tried, her eyes kept drifting back to James. He sat there alone, occasionally glancing at his watch, completely trusting that his so-called business partner would honor their agreement, would keep his word. During her break, Lucy slipped out into the narrow alley behind the restaurant, the place where the staff went to steal a few moments of peace and quiet. The October air was crisp and invigorating against her face as she pulled out her phone and began scrolling through news articles about Harrison Tech. The more she read, the clearer the pattern became. The company had a disturbing habit of acquiring smaller firms, only to systematically strip them for their assets, leaving hundreds of employees jobless and without any recourse. David's story wasn't unique. It wasn't an isolated incident. It was part of a deliberate, calculated strategy that prioritized profit margins above all else, a strategy that callously destroyed lives in its wake. She thought about her husband, back home, probably asleep in his recliner with medical journals scattered all around him. Since losing his job, he had thrown himself into his studies, determined to find new ways to contribute, to make a difference, despite his physical limitations. His unwavering courage humbled her on a daily basis, and she knew, deep down, that he would want her to do the right thing, even if it was for a complete stranger. When Lucy returned to the dining room, she noticed James check his phone again. His confidence had visibly dimmed, just a little, and she guessed he was probably starting to wonder why his meeting was running so late. She noticed the almost unconscious way he touched his wedding ring when he was deep in thought, a small, almost imperceptible gesture that humanized the powerful executive, that reminded her that he was more than just a titan of industry. Perhaps he, too, had someone at home who believed in him, someone whose world would be shattered if this deal went south. The internal debate tore at her conscience, leaving her feeling conflicted and uncertain. James represented everything she resented about corporate America, everything that made her blood boil. The obscene wealth, the unchecked power, the ability to casually make deals worth more than most people earned in a lifetime. Yet, there he sat, trusting and vulnerable, completely unaware that his faith was about to be betrayed in the most brutal way possible. Lucy had spent months feeling powerless, feeling like a pawn, against the faceless forces that had so callously devastated her family. Tonight, however, she held the power to prevent someone else's devastation, to maybe right a wrong. If this moment resonates with you, please give the video a thumbs up. As the clock struck 9:30, Lucy finally made her decision. She smoothed her apron, took a deep, calming breath, and walked purposefully toward James Chen's table, knowing that the next few minutes would irrevocably alter both their lives forever. "Sir." Lucy's voice barely registered above a whisper as she approached James's table. Her heart was hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird, and for a fleeting moment, she wondered if she had completely lost her mind. What was she? A lowly waitress drowning in debt, interrupting a billionaire's important business dinner. James looked up from his phone, his expression polite but somewhat detached. "Yes? Is there something you need?" Lucy glanced nervously around the dining room, making sure that no one else could overhear their conversation. "I'm sorry to disturb you, but I think you're about to be betrayed." The words spilled out of her mouth before she could fully stop them, and James's eyebrows shot up in surprise. "I beg your pardon?" She knelt beside his chair, her voice urgent but controlled. "Mr. Harrison isn't planning on honoring your deal. I overheard his assistant making calls about backup buyers, about pulling out at the last minute. They're planning on leaving you high and dry and selling to someone else." James stared at her, his mind visibly struggling to process this information. "You're telling me that Robert Harrison, who I've known and worked with for 10 years, is planning to double-cross me based on something you overheard?" The skepticism in his voice was palpable, and it stung, but Lucy understood it. She was a complete stranger to him, just another nameless face in the service industry, someone that powerful people barely even registered. "I know how this sounds. I know you have absolutely no reason to trust me, but that company destroyed my husband's life, and I've learned to recognize their patterns. They did the exact same thing to 3 other firms this year." Something in her tone, some raw, undeniable truth, made James lean forward, his interest piqued. "What happened to your husband?" Lucy's voice softened, growing quiet. "Harrison Tech laid him off right before he was diagnosed with a chronic illness. Cut off his health insurance. Left us with absolutely nothing." She paused, seeing a flicker of recognition in James's eyes. "I don't want that to happen to you. Even though we're strangers, even though your world and mine couldn't possibly be more different." For the first time that evening, James really looked at her, not as a server, but as a person, a human being carrying her own considerable weight of worry and hope. He saw the exhaustion etched around her eyes, the way her hands trembled almost imperceptibly despite her calm voice, the sheer strength it must have taken for her to approach him, to insert herself into this situation. "Why are you telling me this?" he asked softly, his voice filled with genuine curiosity. "Because everyone deserves a fighting chance," Lucy replied, her voice unwavering. "Because sometimes the right thing to do is also the hardest thing to do. Have you ever faced something like this? Let us know in the comments." James glanced at his phone again. Harrison was now 15 minutes late, which was highly unusual for a man who prided himself on his punctuality, his unwavering commitment to being on time. Lucy's warning began to feel less impossible, less like a far-fetched conspiracy theory, and more like a lifeline he hadn't even realized he desperately needed. James's phone buzzed with a text message. "Running late. Start without me. Harrison." The casual dismissal in those few words suddenly felt calculated, almost deliberately disrespectful, rather than simply courteous. Lucy watched his face change as the pieces of the puzzle clicked into place, as he finally saw the truth. "He's never late," James murmured, more to himself than to Lucy. In 10 years of business together, Robert has never been late to anything important. He looked up at her with a newfound respect in his eyes. "How did you know?" Lucy pulled out her phone and showed him the news articles she had carefully bookmarked over the past months. "Harrison Tech has done this before. They string companies along, get them to reject other offers, then pull out at the last minute when the target is at their most vulnerable. It's not personal, it's just business to them." James scrolled through the articles, his expression growing darker and more grim with each story. Companies that had trusted Harrison, families torn apart by sudden, unexpected layoffs, executives who had lost everything because they had believed in handshake agreements, in a man's word. "My God," he whispered, his voice laced with disbelief. I turned down 3 other offers because Robert assured me we had a solid deal, that everything was set in stone. You still have time, Lucy said gently, offering him a glimmer of hope. It's not even 10 o'clock. Those other buyers might still be interested. For a moment, James sat in stunned silence, trying to process how close he had come to losing everything he had worked so hard for, everything he held dear. His company, his employees' jobs, his own family's security. All of it had hung precariously in the balance while he had waited trustingly for a friend, a colleague, who was secretly planning to betray him in the worst possible way. I need to make some calls, he said, standing abruptly, his voice regaining its usual authority. Then he paused, really looking at Lucy for the second time that evening, seeing her, truly seeing her. Why? Why did you save me? After what happened to your husband, you had every single reason to let me fall, to let me crash and burn. Lucy straightened her apron and, for the first time all evening, she smiled, a genuine, heartfelt smile that reached her eyes. Because becoming bitter doesn't heal anything, because kindness is the only thing that grows when you give it away. My husband taught me that, even after everything he's been through. James felt something shift inside his chest. A warmth he hadn't experienced in years of cutthroat business dealings. A feeling that had been dormant for far too long. What's your name? Lucy Martinez. Lucy Martinez, you just saved my company, and probably my marriage. How can I ever repay you? She was already stepping back toward the bustling kitchen, trying to avoid any further attention. Just pay it forward someday. Help someone else when they need it most. If you've been enjoying this story, subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming tales. As Lucy disappeared into the organized chaos of the kitchen, James pulled out his phone and began making the calls that would salvage his future, that would snatch victory from the jaws of defeat. But even as he negotiated new deals and secured his company's survival, he couldn't stop thinking about the waitress who had risked her job, her livelihood, to save a stranger from financial ruin. 3 months later, Lucy was meticulously arranging flowers in the lobby of the David Martinez Medical Research Foundation when she heard familiar footsteps approaching from behind. She turned to find James Chun, looking more relaxed and at ease than she had ever seen him, carrying a large envelope and sporting a genuine, heartfelt smile. Hello, Lucy. Mr. Chun. She wiped her hands self-consciously on her jeans, suddenly aware that she was no longer wearing her server's uniform, that she was dressed in casual clothes. What brings you here? I wanted to see the foundation David started with the grant we provided, and I wanted to thank you properly, to express my gratitude in a way that words simply can't. He handed her the envelope. The preliminary research your husband's team published last month has already attracted the attention of 3 major pharmaceutical companies. They're eager to fund clinical trials to help him bring his ideas to life. Lucy's eyes welled up with tears as she opened the envelope. Inside was a check that would cover David's medical expenses for the next 5 years, along with a letter formally offering him a position as chief researcher at James's new medical technology division. The company that tried to destroy you ended up creating something beautiful, James said softly, his voice filled with emotion. Harrison Tech went bankrupt 2 weeks ago. Turns out betraying business partners isn't a sustainable strategy, after all. But David's research is going to help thousands of people, to alleviate suffering and improve lives. James, we can't accept this much money. Simply too much. Yes, you can, and you will. His voice carried the same quiet authority she had heard that night at the restaurant. But now it was softened by genuine warmth and heartfelt sincerity. That evening, you taught me that real wealth isn't measured in deals or acquisitions, in profit margins or quarterly reports. It's measured in the lives we touch and the good we do when no one's watching. Lucy walked him through the foundation's small but steadily growing facility, proudly showing him the fruits of their labor. They paused at David's office, where he was deep in conversation with a team of young researchers, his face animated with the same passion and infectious enthusiasm that had first made Lucy fall in love with him years ago. He looks happy, James observed, a smile playing on his lips. He is. We both are. For the first time in years, we're not just surviving, we're thriving. We're building something meaningful, something that will leave a lasting impact on the world. Lucy turned to face him, her eyes shining with gratitude. You didn't have to do any of this. You went above and beyond. Yes, I did. You saved my company that night, but more importantly, you saved my soul. I'd forgotten that business could be about more than profit margins and quarterly reports, that it could be a force for good in the world. You reminded me that behind every decision, behind every deal, are real people with real lives, with hopes and dreams and fears. As they walked back to the lobby, James paused at the Foundation's mission statement, elegantly etched in marble. Healing begins when kindness meets courage. David wrote that, Lucy said proudly, her voice filled with admiration. It's perfect, and it's exactly what you showed me that night. James extended his hand for a shake, then thought better of it and pulled her into a warm, heartfelt hug. Thank you, Lucy Martinez. Thank you for choosing kindness when you had every reason to choose revenge, for showing me that even in the darkest of times, there is always hope. As James left the Foundation, Lucy stood in the afternoon sunlight streaming through the lobby windows, feeling a sense of peace and contentment she hadn't felt in years. Sometimes the smallest acts of courage can create the biggest changes, can ripple outwards and transform the world around us. Sometimes a whispered warning can become a foundation for hope, a spark that ignites something extraordinary. And sometimes, choosing kindness over bitterness doesn't just heal one heart. It heals many, spreading outwards like ripples in a pond. If you enjoyed this story, please remember to leave a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe for more heartwarming tales like this one. Thank you for joining us on this journey of hope and inspiration. And remember, you never know when your next act of kindness might change someone's entire world.